Anyways, welcome to the Pastors on Porn podcast. And I've got some great friends with me today, Nate Larkin and Aaron Porter from Franklin, Tennessee. You're also in Franklin, right, Aaron?
I'm in Murfreesboro.
Yeah,
it's
Tennessee.
about 30 minutes from Franklin.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we've kind of split our podcasts here. I've transitioned most of our general recovery guys over to the Finding Traction podcast, and I've kind of left this podcast, Pastors on Porn, for pretty much issues related to ministry and guys in ministry, gals in ministry, and wrestling with sexual brokenness. And so really, it's one of the reasons why I wanted you guys on the podcast. And let me just say, Aaron, you won my heart over. I was on the Pirate Monk podcast a few months back, and then I listened back, and I know you weren't able to be on it. And then I listened to a little bit of the talk you had afterwards, and you made a comment that just, like I say, won my heart. When I planted the church here in Chilliwack 25 years ago, we had in a visiting professor, and and he was a preaching professor, and he was going to kind of teach to us pastors about a good way to prepare a sermon. Now you got to picture it here. I'm planting a church, I'm substitute teaching, and I got 3 young kids. And this guy says to everybody, he says, if you're not spending 25 hours a week preparing for your message, you're doing a disservice to the Word of God. And you made this comment afterwards. It's like, dude, what did you go to seminary for then? Do you remember that comment?
I certainly do.
Oh.
I believe that professor and I probably wouldn't have had a lot in common.
No, and it's just like yet one other weight upon a pastor's thing of what they should do and what they should, what it should look like. And, needless to say, I was heading for my first serious burnout, in terms of that. But Nate, I know you've had experience in ministry, and Aaron, your background a bit, has it involved pastoral ministry? What's your...
I was a pastor for 22 and a half years and planted 2 churches.
Wow. So you know about church planting 22 times, and how many dog years is that? Times 7?
Sure feels like dog years sometimes.
Oh my goodness. Well, here's a question I want to throw out to you, because both of you guys, and if you haven't read Samson and the Pirate Monks, guys, listening to this, it's one of my favorite books on recovery. And Nate talks about his journey as a pastor and also struggling with sexual brokenness. But here's a question I wanted to ask you. Do you think that being in ministry, it sped up your desire for healing, or did it insulate you from receiving healing? So there's a first, did it insulate you, or did it actually act as to speed up your desire for healing?
Wow, what a great question. I think in my case, my participation in ministry, because in the church that I planted and in the church culture in which I was raised and educated, the pastor was placed in a heroic role. My job was to climb up on the pedestal and to prove that it was possible to stay there, and from the top to dispense wisdom on how they too could, stay atop the pedestal. My knowledge, my private knowledge, which I could not disclose because I would lose my place on the pedestal and destroy the faith of the church and all that kind of stuff. My private knowledge that I was failing between Sundays desperately just led me, I had 2 things going on. I had a desperate desire for healing, but at the same time, a deep sense of shame that drove me farther and farther and farther into isolation, farther away from where healing can be found.
Wow. How about you, Aaron? Would you say that kind of was your situation?
No, I was, my upbringing and pastoral life couldn't have been more different than Nate's, which was really a gift. When I left home at 17, I ended up with a group of older guys in Los Angeles and roommates who had all struggled with sexual addiction. So it was just an open conversation from the time I was 17. And I went into full-time ministry the week I turned 20. Wow. And just had totally open relationships with staff members, with elders. The idea that somebody would get fired because they looked at porn was just absurd to everybody. And then after I met Nate, I got to have a pastor pirate group, where we had 12 full-time ministers in there, and some of the closest relationships I still have came from that group. So if it's at all encouraging to any pastors listening, you really don't have to live that. And the first church I planted, we were really open from the beginning. If you want a perfect pastor, you should find another church. There's lots of them out there, evidently. But I remember the first time I talked about, why do I still want to look at porn in my 30s at that time? Like I was still like 13. And I remember when I said that for the first time in a sermon, you just knew the status of every relationship in the room, because you saw some guys kind of shrink, like, I hope my wife doesn't think he's talking about anything I deal with. And others would look at each other like, oh yeah, we're in this together. Yeah. So I highly recommend throwing that out for any pastor, just so you get to know your people in a really quick, deep way.
Yeah, we've had a few stories of guys in my Saturday morning group that I've run for 15 years now. And those kind of conversations in the car on the way home, when the wife turns to her husband and goes, well, you don't struggle with that, do you?
To which I'm sure every husband says, can we talk about this when the kids aren't in the back seat, honey?
Exactly. And there's that pause, that what's the legitimate pause? If it's 2 seconds, the wife knows after 3 seconds, okay, we have a problem. But then you ask yourself, you mean somehow in your marriage you never had that conversation for 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years as part of that? But apparently it helps people have conversation. And but it's true. It's interesting going into pastoring in that context. My guess would be that I'm not sure that if it made it more, did it make it more likely for you to pursue healing in that environment then? Do you think your trajectory was maybe a little, it was greased a lot better than maybe what Nate experienced?
Oh, I think so. I always felt like it was okay to be in the struggle. You just need to be struggling.
Right.
And in isolation, I mean, it's not like I haven't been in isolation during times of my life,
right?
But in isolation, that's just the dark breeding ground for every kind of spiritual fungus to thrive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, living on that high wire, act, there's a reason why Circus du Soleil just declared bankruptcy. So it's not sustainable long term, I guess. But
the beauty is it gets exponentially easier because you're receiving the manifestations of God's various graces,
right,
from the hands, from the lips of your brothers. And so it makes it much easier to want to go back and have another meal at that table.
Yeah. God with skin on, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you do then, when you sit down with a pastor? I know you were a part of a group, or maybe you have people call you and they say, you know what, I'm pastoring in a church and I'm not doing well, or whatever the code word is, or I'm struggling, I'm occasionally looking, whatever that means. Like, how do you begin to respond to somebody who is a pastor who's taking those first ginger steps to becoming known? How would you guys respond to that? How would you walk them through that?
Nate, I'll start.
Well, first of all, it's a smile, it's an embrace, it's a me too, it's a, and a celebration that what the gift is. I really believe that sex addiction for a pastor can be an enormous gift. Most of us need a good dose of humility. We need a nudge back toward our own humanity. And there's nothing like a humiliating, addiction to help with that.
Right.
But also then to immediately assure the guy that he is far from alone. Most pastors have heard the statistics that more than half the men in full-time ministry have an ongoing struggle with pornography, but they've not had the opportunity to have an open conversation with other men in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
So I love to get those guys as quickly as possible into one of the virtual Samson meetings where we've got plenty of pastors.
Yeah. How about you, Ern?
Yeah, I'm totally with Nate. I think the conversation is so often just dire. Like, this is scary.
Yeah.
And what are we going to do? And how's your livelihood going to be threatened? Man, sin is already defeated. And I just have an ongoing relationship with me and my flesh where I'm trying to surrender to the Spirit. But in the end, the victory's already been made. So I just want this to be a hopeful conversation, that this is, there are gifts at the other side, and you're not defeated regardless of how deep in the pit you feel. There's the deliverer from the pit. You've already been delivered from the pit. You just got to get on board with experiencing that in real life. So I really just want to start at a hopeful and victorious place and then get to the practical pieces of, so what do we do with this? I mean, I've already got the fruit of the Spirit, because it's the fruit of the Spirit.
Right.
It's not my fruit. So I don't need more patience. I just need to surrender my anger. But everything I need, I already possess, because it's within the power of the Spirit and not mine. And that's really encouraging to me.
Right.
Even in times where I realize I'm choosing this other path. This is all me. I've got what I need and I'm not using it. Okay. That's still encouraging, because it means I can lay it down.
Right. Well, and I think sometimes the avenue into this makes a big difference. Like I started to pursue healing around, for sexual freedom. I love what you describe yourself, Nate, as a recovering porn addict. I love the way you do that. For me, it wasn't because of outside intervention or my wife saying, get out or whatever. It was more of, I just describe it as the heavy hand of God that made it too difficult for me to live two contradictory lives. So that, I think, helped, because for me, it was always something that was internally driven. Having said that, most guys, over 50, someone say over 80, are there because some sort of outside, the wife is threatening to take the keys away, or there's something. So what do you guys do if, you get a call from a board member or a church elder and they're saying, and they're saying, you need to deal with this struggling pastor, or where he's out of here, or, you get a call from somebody who's wanting to quote unquote hold the pastor accountable, or it's a discipline thing, or how, what sort of diagnostic approach would you use coming in as a bit of a reference point for a church who has a struggling pastor, so to speak? I'd be curious, what if a chairman of a board had called you, what would you say?
Yeah. This is so heavily dependent upon the culture of the church, and how deeply it has embraced the grace of the gospel. Too often, and ironically, too often in churches with grace in the name.
Yep.
Code word. Interesting.
When that first call comes, the assumption is just that there's going to be an investigation, and if he is guilty, or if the suspicions are confirmed, it's a foregone conclusion what's going to happen. He's out of here, because we have a zero tolerance policy. This is how it's dealt with. It's immediate surgery, excise the cancer. Because certainly, if the pastor has a sex problem, he's probably the only person in the church that does, and we got to cut it out now so it doesn't spread. Or
right,
it's just
so
insane.
all those people that aren't looking at porn, we don't want it to be catching, because nobody else is looking at porn.
Yeah. I remember,
or because we have to do it for some vague legal reason. Some denominational legal person said that's risk management.
I remember specifically being looped into a conference call of a church board talking about a similar situation. It wasn't a senior pastor, but it was a guy on staff. And the question was, all right, we've already sent the guy away. They actually sent him to me, and I was getting him into treatment. The question before the board was, what do we tell the church on Sunday? And I heard an old guy in the background. I could tell by his voice that he was an older guy. And he said, well, it's simple. We just tell him, he did it and he's done. He's gone. And I just got furious. and said, brothers, that is the very last thing you do. Because here's what happens. I know that in a church the size of yours, there are at least 200 guys in your church who are doing what he has done. And if that's what you say on Sunday morning, you are saying loud and clear, this church is not a safe place for repentant sinners. But what you have now is an opportunity to display the gospel. Yes, he's guilty. Yes, we love him. Yes, we're getting him help. And yes, our hope is that he will return. And fortunately, I mean, that is the course that the church was committed to. And in the long run, it paid huge dividends for that church. Yeah. They became known as a recovery church.
Wow.
And that man, when he came back, led their recovery ministry.
So Vern, I have to start by saying I'm not a popular person to come to on this.
Okay.
Because my first question to any board or group is, what are you after here? Are you after?
We're after to hold them accountable, Aaron. That's what we're after.
So I would say, oh, good. Well, if you're going to do that, then just fire him and tell everybody that anybody who makes any kind of mistake, I mean, you can even lay it out and say these kinds, you're gone, and this is the example. Or are you guys into a longer journey of grace and healing, which, of course, they usually say that. I say, cool, here's where we'll start. This group needs to get together and confess all the sins you haven't got caught with and your relationship with pornography so that we can start from a place of understanding each other and what we struggle with. So let's start there, and then let's bring this guy's story into the mix.
So we should all get out where there's a nice sandy piece of road, and we should all get our fingers and all start writing on the road our sins and itemizing them.
See, the confusion, and the reason that's so hard is that for a lot of elder boards, they aren't brothers. They're the business end of the church.
Right. And
so I would not entrust my heart and livelihood to a group of businessmen and say, yeah, it's what's on the table today. Let's talk about what kind of porn Aaron likes and why he goes there when his heart wants connection. Like, that's ridiculous. You're having the most intimate conversation without any intimacy. Right. Screw that. You want to have an intimate conversation, everybody gets intimate, or I'm out. Yeah. And if they don't want to, then I'd say make your business decision. Like it's a business decision, even though you're dealing with a person's life and heart. But if you want to get into the real struggle, let's do it. Here's where we start. Let's just talk openly about how this has impacted your life personally.
Right. Well, one of the buzzwords or buzz phrases going around, and trust me, I've been on lots of church websites, is no perfect people, but I don't think they mean that. No perfect people. Well, it doesn't mean somebody who's struggling with porn or the pastor. We just mean generally we like it as a great slogan. The problem is, I think I've shared it other times, is business people have a desire to keep shiny church, because shiny church is what people want. So they think their lives can be shiny. So the wife who's sitting Sunday morning beside her husband, she doesn't want to hear the pastor talk about his struggle with porn, because that might encourage her husband to start looking at porn, or so she might, you know what I'm saying? So business people, they go, man, we talked about a culture of brokenness last Sunday morning, and I said, that's not the sort of thing you want to put up on your marquee. Most people are going, I was looking for something a little more upbeat or more uplifting.
Upbeat.
I want to see a church marquee right out front that says "Porn Addicts Welcome."
Oh my goodness. There we go. I like that. And change it every week.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's so encouraging. The church that I got to be a part of was so great in this area, and was such a great example of how many people, I would say half the church was over 50. Mm-hmm. And for those business people that think they're strategizing to get more people into the church, I don't know what their strategy's for. Usually it's more people.
Right.
But
there's more money. More people means more money.
Right. So I think there's a fear that you'll repel people even this whole culture of brokenness, whatever, there's just so many words to just say, just being honest about real life. And it doesn't matter if it's porn or your issues shopping, or you're a wife who's a control freak, and if everything isn't happening the way you've planned, you can't handle, and you go to rage towards your family. That's just real life. It's just honesty. And once people have permission for that, I don't see that as being repellent in my experience. It combines people, it joins people. It's nothing to be afraid of. So I don't know how weak we think people are that we have these shiny churches. It's just so unnecessary.
Well, I think the challenge is one of the things we're dealing in people's lives is the power of shame. I got an email. I've been in the process. I'm transitioning this fall to a younger couple in our church. 25 years of pastoring our church, I think, is about time to transition to a couple in their 30s. And I'm going to just start working more with churches and men as part of my own journey and out of my own journey out of pornography. One of the questions, just that as I've been looking around this, and I got an email from a pastor yesterday. He said, here's the challenge. He said, Vern, I saw your email, and he said, we did a marriage course, and we could tell that one of the issues for men was this issue of pornography. But when we put a sign up out, nobody signed up for the group. And he says, so we're not sure what to do as a church. We have a sense that this is a real problem, but we don't know how to get at it in a way that draws men in. And one of the things I love about, the Pirate Monk groups and the things you guys have done is you've obviously given some real thought and intentionality to how do you draw men in to these important discussions so that issues that are so shame laden, like I think of the Heart of the Man video where the guy ended up sharing about his being sexually abused as a child. John Lynch, I think it was. Like, how do you create these cultures of real authenticity, vulnerability, honesty, so that out of this culture, some of these things begin to be addressed? Tell me just a little bit about your approach and maybe what you would say to that pastor that nobody signed up for his porn group. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd love to hear about your approach.
Well, one thing, the Samson Society, contrary to a popular misconception, is not a group for porn addicts or sex addicts.
Right.
You don't have to be a porn addict to. It helps, but it's not necessary. It's not required.
Good. That's good to know. So we want you to go out now.
But we do have guys in Samson who have some other out of control compulsive behavior has led them deep into the weeds, and that's what's brought them here.
Or they're just in isolation and needing an authentic community.
Right.
Yeah.
Hard to believe that there could be men out there in isolation. Boy, that's.
Yeah. The main thing, the main string we play on is our need for community and brotherhood, authentic brotherhood. So invite guys to an authentic sharing meeting. It's interesting. A Samson meeting is not really, even though most of the guys in a Samson meeting are dealing with a sexual issue of some kind, it's not at all uncommon for sex never to be mentioned during the course of a meeting. Because we're talking about the deeper issues, and we're talking honestly out of the full breadth of our experience, all of our life. Yes, I'm a recovering porn addict, but I'm far more than that.
Right.
And today, that's not where the battle is the hottest. Right now I'm waging something else, and it doesn't matter what the issue is. I'm free to talk about it without filters, without speaking in code. And I'm going to get brothers who are going to lean in and listen. They're not going to preach to me. They're not going to try to correct me. They're going to be with me in the struggle. And that's what we're need. What I experience, it was actually in meetings like Samson meetings, and in Samson meetings once Samson got started, that I learned non-sexual intimacy. I learned intimacy. And one of the reasons that women whose husbands are in Samson push them out the door to go to meetings is they like what comes back.
Right.
Because a guy learns how to get in touch with his heart, share his heart. He learns non-sexual intimacy, and then can come home and actually have an intimate conversation with his wife without always swinging for the fences sexually.
Well, and I think, Nate, that might be behind your statement that could sound jarring, that your sexual addiction was a gift to you. It wasn't a gift in and of itself. It was a gift in terms of the avenue that it helped you explore and open up, that it was a window into all of those other issues that without, you probably just would have tried to skip through life playing shuck and jive kind of version of Nate, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
How about you, Aaron? What does that group look like to you, and how is that worked out?
Sorry, what the being in a Samson group?
Yeah, being in a Samson group, and this whole idea around learning to talk about our issues, and the fact that it's very hard to get people,
Oh yeah, hard to get them into the sex group.
Yeah.
Yes.
The P group, the pervert group. Right.
Right. Yeah. Fully against it. It's not like pro pervert.
Yes, exactly.
You got to be really clear when you're promoting this in church.
Yes, that's right. Oh my.
Yeah,
the doors are through the nursery. No. Like P. That sounds like pedophile. That's it's just like, oh my goodness. Yeah.
So true. Okay, so there were kind of two questions in that. Your first was, how do you get guys to open up? And the second is more, how do you promote it to a group of,
it's more of how do you create the culture? Yeah.
Yeah. I when you asked that question, I was thinking of a church that Nate and I went to not too long ago, where it seemed that the group of guys that came didn't fully get what we were doing there. Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
So they were kind of like, and you guys are doing what this weekend? So they signed up because the pastor asked them to. And so good job on him. Right. Just like that was how to get them in, tell them nothing.
Yeah.
But the way these things start, Nate just gets up and tells his story.
Right.
And for anyone that's heard Nate tell his story, he does not share it in a way that carries shame in the story, though there are shameful parts of the story. It's just part of the story that's brought him into community. And I think that is the catalyst for all guys to feel safe.
Right.
Somebody has to stand up and say, I can be honest. And by the way, I don't think of people like Simon the leper. That's a crap name. He wasn't a leper anymore. Stop calling me Simon the leper. Matthew the tax collector. Poor guy. He left the tax booth. He's not a tax collector anymore. Lazarus, the previously dead guy. Yeah, that doesn't come up as often in Scripture.
Right.
I often thought, like, what? How awful. Doubting Thomas, that these guys got saddled with these names. That seems shaming. But then I thought, in the presence of Jesus, there wasn't any shame in that. There is, it carries with it the glory of the journey. And I can't imagine that Matthew, if he was ever called the tax collector, that got brought up, sat there like, oh, I'm crushed again. You still remember I was a tax collector? I don't think so.
Right.
Because he had spent this time with Jesus where he say, oh, no, I want to tell you this part of my story. It is embarrassing, but it's the thing that brings so much joy, because it just highlights how amazing my daddy is in heaven. So I think that as long as we just give statistics and talk about porn in theory and what people ought to do and don't do, but it's not just a conversation about our lives, then we're keeping the wall up where it's still not safe to go to the other side with our story.
Well, and I think that's probably the hinge statement here, because as a pastor who wants to create that culture in a church, it doesn't mean that you need to go out and develop a porn addiction, but it just means that you need to start becoming willing to identify your shame and being willing to expose that and say, you know what, I lose it with my kids and say nasty things to them, or you know what, I'm downright cruel to my wife at times, or you know what, I am so doggone envious of that other pastor. I wish bad things would happen to whatever it is. Just, so I think as a pastor, if we begin to speak out who we are without Jesus. And then, as you said, what Jesus has done in our lives. And other men go, oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, then shame doesn't have to, or I struggled with abuse in my family, or whatever that is. There's so many areas, right?
There's a critical part in that those conversations are real-time conversations, not testimonies of how God's already fixed it.
Yes.
Because in the church, we often aren't ashamed to tell the story as long as it's done.
Right.
And I remember early on in Samson, if some guy came in, if I was the guy who came in and said, man, I was having a hard week last week, but I got through it, spent some time with God, I'm all better now. The question that would inevitably be asked is, well, who did you call when you were going through that?
Right.
And if the answer was, I didn't call anybody, then nobody was giving praise and applause for that testimonial of how God got me through it. Because all that was really saying is, yeah, by the power of my own strength, I was able to neglect community and successfully live in isolation without jerking off. Yay me.
Yeah, good at doing chin up. Good at doing chin ups, but you missed the point. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So real-time testimonies of, hey, this week, this is what I'm going through right now. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be I went and binge drank or spent all day looking at porn. It can be those little things you're talking about. It's just a culture of honesty where real life is allowed to be discussed.
Oh, that's cool. Well, guys, I see our time is up, but I want to thank both of you for coming on the podcast, Nate and Aaron. And it's great to have you. I encourage everybody to check out your podcast, which is this. What's the name of the podcast again? I know I listened to it.
The Pirate Monk Podcast.
The Pirate Monk Podcast. You guys have great guests. It's not just about porn. You've got a great variety of guests and great for a variety of issues. So go check out the Pirate Monk Podcast. And again, thank you guys for being a part of the show. And I hope that we can meet in person when we can finally cross the border. It might as well be the Berlin Wall right now. But eventually our two countries will be joined again, and we'll have to get you up to Canada here as well.
Awesome.
Bless you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Vern.
Thanks, Vern.